Eric, thank you for that. Again, thank you for being here. It's the first time that I've been here. I understand, of course, NISIS has presented here before, but taken this role about a year and a half ago, so I'm new to this. I have to thank Dr. Jeff Lloyd for this presentation. This is actually his. And speaking with Eric here just a minute ago, I was voluntold to do this Thursday of last week. So bear with me. I've got some notes on my slides that he and I sat and spoke for a very brief moment last Thursday morning, and now I get to take it over. So what are we're talking about the life of wood ties, and I'm going to look at this from a standpoint of the industry. I'm not looking at it so much of a standpoint of I'm a sales guy. I'd love to look at it that way, but that's not what we do. I'm looking at it from all the broad spectrums of the industry and how to extend the life of the ties. So what can we learn from 50 years of dual treatment, and what could we do better? I can't see that very well. It's here. So the best ways to make the ties last longer is promoting the use of handling practices and preservatives that significantly extend the useful life of treated wood. Shut the lights. And in doing so, if ties are dual treated through studies and through computations, using that there's about 22 million ties a year that are going through a treatment process and through change-out process with railroads. So if you take that number and you divide that in half, so 11 million ties on an annual basis at $50 a tie, plus the installation cost that you would not have to worry about as well, and no disposal of ties either, is where this number had come up from $750 million in savings across the industry. Along with that covers the tip fees that would think, going back to biomass. So trying to get these to cogen plants or trying to get the ties to burn, trying to incorporate tip fees in there to try to get the burn of the cogen plants back up and running, or to build one, or, to have one in the industry to be able to do this again. So in the short video here, you can see that is what we do not want in a tie. I don't know how many times he's going to step on that before he almost goes through, and hopefully the video will stop here, but you can see the heartwood face of this tie was oriented in the wrong way when this tie was installed. So it has caused the rot, and I guess it's just going to keep going there. Sorry. How about if we just go to the next slide? There we go. So some of you might recognize the person in this picture. On the right-hand side is Dr. Nate Irby, and on the left-hand side is a gentleman by the last name of Perney. That's Mike Perney with Gross & Janes. So when we started incorporating this idea that was commercialized with NISIS in a way of dual treating the ties, Gross & Janes was one of the companies that kicked this off on ambient temperature dipping the ties, so that it was not heated at the point that they were doing this process. And then of course you can see that they're treated with creosote after that. So if you take a look at the ties and you see all the red, and forgive me, I hope I'm educating at least someone, the red portion of this tie that you see is where the borate diffusion has taken place. And then of course after that you can see with the creosote treatment and the penetration that you've got with that. So you got heartwood penetration in here with the borates to help preserve the heartwood of this tie. Hopefully giving that tie an opportunity to last at least twice the age it would have if it did not have the borate treatment performed on it. And in this process, you can see that the commercialization of this BTX program on bridge timbers by NISIS. This work is being done at a Stella Jones plant. So you can see they're drilling the hole in this bridge timber, and it is nominally going to be 1/2 of an inch deeper than half of the distance of the tie. So if you have a 10-inch bridge timber, then you're going to drill 5.5 inches deep. You drill the hole, you're going to fill that hole with a borate solution, and then you're going to cap it. So in the Boltonization process, in the treatment process of this tie, in that last picture that went away a lot faster than the other ones did, all the red that you saw in there, back up for me and go forward again. So if you take note, I know we're going through this again, if you take note of the red around the holes and the diffusion that has taken place in the Boltonization process of that borate inside that tie due to drilling these holes. Now, we've done numerous studies with University of Tennessee and with Stella Jones and at our plant as well, even on break testing and the strength of these ties after these holes were drilled, and we have not had a problem with it. Then you can see it's going into the cylinder, and these were treated with QNAP here. It's wiped clean. Process is complete. There's the red that I was talking about in a different species of ties. So good diffusion through the Boltonization of doing the treatment through the BTX program that we have commercialized. In this tie, you can see, or these ties, excuse me, and they were cut instead of me walking in front of it. These two ties go together. Of course, these two together and these two together. There's a problem here. You see, there's a little bit of borate up at the top on this one. You got a little bit over here, some right here. Problem with these ties is the dual treatment process was not performed correctly. These ties were extremely green and extremely wet. So they did not allow the penetration, because they were treated too green, for the borate process to go through, nor did it allow the creosote to soak as it was supposed to. And you can see over here, a 0.07 pounds per cubic foot for the DOT, the borate, and 0.25 is what it's supposed to be. So way off the numbers in this, and later on, we'll see some pictures as to what happens when this process takes place and is not, I'm not saying treated correctly, I'm saying that the diffusion was not allowed to take place here. So the ties that you see here on the left-hand side were treated correctly. The ties on the right-hand side is another picture. I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. Especially in this tie right here. This tie was too green, did not allow the time to go through the drying cycle, got treated too early, moisture content was too high, did not allow the checking to potentially take place in the drying cycle. So now what happened is this tie was treated, and then the checking process takes place because it's still drying out. You can see in the opening there, you have very low penetration of the creosote that went into this tie. And in this picture, you can see a chunk of it that's been chipped off, and there's hardly any creosote at any depth that took place in this tie. It's not what we're looking for. We're looking for proper penetration of borate, and obviously looking for proper penetration of the treatment, whichever that method or product may be at the treatment process. So these ties were treated too green is the problem that you see on the right-hand side here. And what we were hoping when we commercialized even the BTX program, as well as doing a dual treatment program, is that the railroads would not take a look at this study and say, well, now you're treating the heartwood of these ties. That means we can reduce our retentions on the treatment through the treatment process and the pressure cylinder. And we hope that's not what's going to take place. We hope that's not what's going to happen, thinking that you're going to save money in that aspect of it, or hoping that through the dual treatment process, you're saving money by those ties lasting much longer through their cycle and not have to take them out as early. So hoping that's the way this is kind of looked at, and that's why we're doing studies like this. In this picture, you'll see this is a product that we manufacture, but it's also approved in the AWPA standards for use in the field. Any cutting, any mechanical damage, any drilling, under any adzing, anything that might take place out on the railroad where you've disturbed the treatment of the tie or a bridge timber, then here's an application that should be used, no matter if it's creosote, no matter if it's copper naphthenate. This is what's approved to be used on those ties out in the field. We'll talk a little bit about heartwood face. So I'll bump over to this picture. Nice little bourbon glasses there that I don't even have one yet. We're going to fix that. But you can see in this picture how the water, if it was to rain, would fill this glass up. And in this picture, of course, it wouldn't. So I'm going to back up a slide. So now you see in this picture, this is where the heartwood face is up. And that is not what we want to see when a tie is installed, because as you can see back here again, this is what's going to happen. It's going to fill that tie up with water. And if you're not getting good heartwood penetration in your borate treatment, now starts your decay process. This is the way that we would like to see the ties installed. Given it, all this sapwood is up, all this sapwood has been treated with whichever process is being used, and hoping that you have borate treatment here in the heartwood that is at least penetrated into the heartwood, maybe not all of it. So now you have all this surface area that's up that is treated, and then you have borate treatment that is hopefully going, kind of down into this area. Much larger area of treatment than if you look at this picture over here and you've created that glass that's full of water now. Or over here, I would rather refer to as you have an umbrella now. And now that umbrella is stopping that water from going into the center of this tie and rotting it out. Like in the pictures in the video that the guy kept stomping and trying to put his foot, thought he was going to fall through there in a minute, but he just kept stomping and video kept playing. That's what I'm talking about. Glass full, glass empty. Again, another picture that represents what I'm talking about. When your heartwood face is incorrectly orientated, there's where that rot starts to happen. So the creosote in this picture here did its job. It treated the sapwood of this tie, but it rotted in the heartwood. This was not a borate treated tie, so the heartwood was not protected, and the orientation was incorrect, and you have a rotten tie. Some of the railroads through the treating plants have also incorporated into their process at the treating plant through the railroad specs, kerfing the ties. If you don't know what kerfing the ties, this is what's kerfing right here. So with a single kerf on a tie is a borate treated tie, and it's a creosote treated tie. And if you have two kerf lines there, then you have a copper naphthenate treated tie that's borate treated as well. Again, what we'd like to see is the railroads are incorporating this on the heartwood face correct side so that they know the orientation of this tie, when it gets out to a tie gang, that curve should be up, which means heartwood face is down. The umbrella is now over the tie. You have the sapwood treatment and you have the heartwood treatment of the borates. That tie is protected much longer, at least twice the life of the tie. "30-year-old tie. Heartwood face was incorrect. But if you see in this picture, pretty good creosote penetration. Heartwood around it is pretty good, but the orientation was wrong. And that's how we ended up with the rot in this tie. Same type of picture. These ties, you'll see you have decay that's coming from underneath the plate in the spikes. Here you're looking at an oak 17-year-old tie. See where the heartwood face is at? It's up top. Spike here, I don't see any spike kill. I don't really see much damage taking place there. Penetration, the red you can see is the borate penetration. If this tie were to be installed the other direction, this side up, that side down, tie could potentially still be in track. So heartwood face direction and orientation is very important to the longevity of the ties as well as the dual treatment process. There's a little bit of a graph here showing penetration. You can see on the top of the tie here, very little borate. See where the spike was at, you're 0.03 maybe in the bottom of the tie. You're all the way up here at 0.1. Of course, the standard when initially treated is 0.25. End-grain penetration is very important, and that's part of the borate process as well, and the BTX process that I showed you the video of early, drilling the holes, putting the DOT borate inside of it, capping it off, and it goes through boultonization process. So end-grain penetration is very important with that process in allowing that longevity of that tie as well. Just kind of a slide that was thrown in here to let you know that we're trying to do the same thing with utility poles as we have commercialized with railroad ties, and trying to get the borate treatment into the poles in the center of the poles as well. The strength testing is also performed on this utility pole, and it had nothing to do with all the drilling that happened and whatever took place in this pole. Strength testing was still very good for this and did not deter the strength of this utility pole. This is also Douglas fir. So it's a very high refractory species. It has big heartwood in it. So that's why we're trying to go through this process, just like I was talking about with the ties, drilling holes into the pole and allowing borate to get inside in the heartwood and treat it and diffuse through the heartwood. One thing that Dr. Jeff Lloyd, done a lot of research on this, has performed a lot of studies on this, has processes going on over in Europe, would like to reintroduce and wish that the railroads treatment plants would reintroduce the fact of pre-drilling ties. Because through the studies that he has performed, as well as what's going on in Europe, and they still do it right now in the United States, in my understanding, I'm just being told this, I'm passing this information to you, is that we used to do this in the United States, and there's some slides here that I'll show you that can prove that. Through drilling used to take place, which allowed treatment to get into the heartwood of the tie, and we stopped doing that. There's supposed to be a video on this one. Sorry. How about that? Thank you. So this is performed in Europe. If you look on the bottom, you see the drill bits down there. They all pop up through drilling the tie. Then it goes to the treatment process after that. So that's something that we would like to see reintroduced to the tie market in the United States of America through Dr. Jeff Lloyd's research that he has done and increasing the longevity of the tie as well. See in this next picture, this understandably looks like a spike hole. This one might be as well, but all these other holes you see are old ties that have been through drilled. They don't look too bad. I don't know the age of these. Dr. Lloyd may, but don't see a lot of decay buildup underneath where the tie plate would have been. I don't see much here. Don't really see anything going on over here, but that's what this is from, is through drilling. That one and that I could argue that was probably a spike, but there was also one right here, and that's the reason for fingers kind of pushing the dust around. But those were through drilling. I apologize, hit the wrong button. But it was a good process. Here's some testing, some studies that were performed. Malott Wood Preserving helped us do this study, as well as Gross and Janes. And you can see in the different ties now, see this one went all the way through. That's a short section. This one's gone all the way through. You can see the various through drilling that has taken place for studies here. And after going through the Boltonization process again, these ties are cut in half. Look at the amount of penetration from borate. Again, this is dipped, or I'm sorry, this was dipped. So after dipping and the borates going in and diffusing through these holes here, the amount of red obviously is the agent that is reacting with the borates and showing you. I mean, that's almost solid red in that tie right there. So it could be beneficial. I'm sure cost plays a big factor into this. I don't know what that is or how the research, if that has been done on that, but it could be very beneficial in the tie market as we go forward. It shows a dipping process taking place in a tank filled with borate. So most generally, if you have not had the opportunity to see this, most of the time that German stack, they will dip. As soon as it gets to the top and it has completely flooded all of the ties in that German stack, it might be 2-3 seconds, and then they'll return and it starts lifting that German stack back out. So it's not a long process. Here you can see on the left-hand side, left picture, left-hand side, right over here is part of the BTX system that I showed you, the drilling, putting the borate in there. That is the only thing that has been done to this tie right here, is it was drilled and applied borate to it, sat outside for 5 years at our plant. Then it was cut in half, and you see the results of that. No treatment of any sort to this tie here, same process, sat outside for 5 years. You can see decay, rot starting to take place. Same thing happened over here, just 2 different ties, 4 ties total. So this one's cut in half. You can see the decay and the rot that's taken place. And again, over here, tie looks pretty structurally sound, looks really good. Again, here's another picture on through boring. This is not with borate. This is only with copper naphthenate. And you can see the amount of diffusion that has taken place in these ties. A lot of this dark blue, this could be whatever metal agent, I apologize, I forgot what that was reacting with the wood and dispersing, but then you can see the red that's also pushed through there as well. And there were no borates in that last picture. That was just copper naphthenate. So in conclusion, we want to make sure you guys that are with the railroad want to make sure, as well as we do, that 0.25 pounds per cubic foot borate per the AWPA and ARIMA standards is what's taking place in the heartwood of the tie to preserve that tie and get that longevity of it. Second thing is you want to make sure that the ties are dried properly. Make sure that air or the drying cycle, as long as they're put up in the air, make sure that moisture content is accurate and what it should be before these ties are treated. Third thing, you want to treat Foley, QNAP, or creosote. You see the QNAP spec is 0.06 pounds per cubic foot. And you want to make sure you have 8 pounds of creosote, not 7 pounds, not 6 pounds. We want to make sure that the ties are getting treated correctly. Do your field treatments. If you have any cutting, I showed you the bucket of ready to use QNAP approved by the AWPA. Any cutting, mechanical damage, anything drilling, adzing that takes place on that tie, make sure you're putting a surface treatment on it in the field. You'll increase that longevity as well. Put preservative under the plate. Again, that's in the drilling the holes before you put the spikes in, whether it's screw spikes, whether it's cut spikes. If you have that opportunity, drill the holes, put a treatment in there. Put ties in the right way, pre-drill for spikes I just mentioned. And if you can't do any of that, the last thing we would want to make sure at least you can try to do is through bore for correcting number 5. That way underneath the plates, it is preserved and you don't have rot or decay that starts to take place underneath the plate. You have a good solid plate, you have a good solid spike, screw spike, whatever it might be, and you're holding that plate the way it needs to be held. I believe that's it for my time. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity. Being Dr. Jeff Lloyd's presentation. If anybody has any questions, I've been in the industry for a little bit. I'd like to hope that I could answer it. If I can't, I'd like to talk to you afterwards. I can get your name and I can get the right man to talk to you probably until you don't want to talk no more. Any questions? Yes, sir. I'm sorry? Pounds per cubic foot. Yep. Yes, sir.
Such that the heartwood is already turned down and they get jumbled up out in the field during installation?
They're shipped any and every and all directions.
So the railroad is responsible for manipulating tie to put that and recognize the heartwood.
Answer that is in the short would be yes. I don't want to answer for the railroad, but I do know I've followed tie gangs. I've been a part of that. I know production numbers are key. So when those ties are thrown out and that tie machine's grabbing them and sticking them in, you know, they might not be orientating that heartwood face in the correct manner. That's why we're hoping to instill that the kerfing process, they'll see that kerfing process and orientate it the right way. So it might have been long or short, but I don't want to answer for the railroads because I know production and I know numbers is what they're looking for. So they might get mixed around, tossed around, upside down, sideways, whatever might happen. And because they're looking to get those ties in and get out. Yes, sir. Sure.
I think that through boring would reason or negate having to orient
My thought process to that, aside from Dr. Lloyd, would be I think it would help, but I still think you would want to orientate that the correct way because it's just an additional preservation or, you know, an additional longevity of that tie. If there's studies done or studies performed on that, I can try to get that for you and I can try to let you know whether, you know, 2 different ways. Did he test it 2 different ways? Did he through bore? Did he not through bore? Did he make sure heartwood face up, heartwood face down? I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards and we can try to find out. Nobody else? Great.
All right.
Very much.